Today, we're speaking with Rachel Yoder, the best-selling author of the 2021 novel Nightbitch. In our conversation with Rachel, we dive into the books that inspire her, her writing process, and how she grounds herself. We delve into the upcoming screen adaptation of Nightbitch starring Amy Adams and what that process has looked like for her. We really hope you enjoy this conversation as much as we did. Happy listening.
But Rachel, thank you. Like Renee said, we are so excited to talk to you. Um, we started Women in Entertainment really from a kind of a film side of things, and quickly books and books to screen have become such a big, huge part of not only the industry but just of what we talk about. We started we have a little book recommendation section called the Book Nook because we're both avid readers, and it just comes up all the time. So we love focusing on writers, on authors, and you have such an interesting story. And Night Bitch is, oh my God, just like crazy popular, and I we want to hear that story and how you've handled that journey as well. But it's just really we geek out getting to talk to authors and getting to talk to writers, and love that this may become a therapy session for me because I have a son who's a creative writing major, and every time I talk to a successful author, it gives me such hope.
Good.
But what we love to do with our audience, we have a lot of men and women starting their career, just out of school. We actually have a lot of students that come to our events, so we love to kind of hear your story and how you got to where you are, how you decided on writing. How you decided on teaching. That's so interesting. And I'm a Midwest girl too. I'm in Kansas City. So it's,
Great. I was just there this spring for a conference.
oh,
Yeah, it was really fun.
but just kind of your story and how you got started. Did you come from a family of writers, and just kind of get us up to where we are now?
Well, first of all, thank you both so much for thinking of me, and for having me here to talk with you. I love talking with women about, desire and dreams and how to say what we want, which I think is what Night Bitch is largely about.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't find writing, writing found me. I come from a family of readers, especially my dad. And so I grew up at the dead end of a dirt road in a Mennonite commune in Ohio, but there were always New Yorkers and Harpers lying around and books on every imaginable subject in the house. My mom was a librarian for many years. And so I spent my summers just at the library for the whole day, reading probably inappropriate books. But yeah, so I really grew up in a family that valued, reading, talking about reading, thinking about reading. I was also part of this Mennonite church in the commune, and it was basically a house church. So we would go around to other people's houses, and everyone there was really eclectic and sophisticated intellectually. And so I just grew up in this context of watching films, reading books, and then talking about them with adults, which is such a gift, right? That was sort of the milieu that I got to form out of. Um, I always secretly wanted to be a writer, or maybe it wasn't secret. It just seemed like a ridiculous thing to want to be because how could I possibly support myself? Like what does a writer do? It just seemed it never seemed like a viable option. Um, and then in college, I took a little detour my senior year, after one of those early 20s blow up your life relationships that sometimes people get into. And I wound up um, in the desert of Arizona. Um, kind of estranged from my family, like alone, really having broken with the whole Mennonite thing, broken with college, broken with the relationship. And I wound up at this little college called Prescott College. And after I graduated, I wound up like working there in an administrative job and taking a creative writing course with a woman named Melanie Bishop. Um, and Melanie told me I was a writer and I should go to grad school. And she led me down that path and was just an angel who changed my life, like this mentor who saw that I sort of desperately wanted to be a writer, but didn't even know how to express that desire. And so she really changed my life. And she gave me a vision for what my life could look like, right? Because I was really lost. My life didn't look like my classmates' lives from college who were in law school or med school or working in finance, and that worried me for many years. And at one point, my dad said to me, don't worry, your path looks different than other people's paths. And that's often what I say to younger writers, right? That like, if you want to be an artist, if you want to be a writer, it's probably not going to look like a lot of your classmates' paths. Maybe you're going to be waitressing while they're like taking the bar exam. uh, that's okay. Like you're on a different path, and that's okay. And the path of artists and writers, I mean, is really one that's rather romantic for this day and age, right? It's like contemplative. We have a calling. Um, it's almost like we are sort of secular clergy, right? That we're this group of seekers and dreamers who are working our way for our entire lives toward the truth or some form of the truth, some beautiful semblance of the truth. And that's really where I found my home as a young adult and an adult, is in this community of really beautiful seekers, and earnest seekers. It really helps to fight the cynicism that so easily can overtake you right now. So, I mean, writing really saved my life, which sounds very dramatic, but it's true. It was a real survival tactic for me in my 20s when I didn't know who I was. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I was, very naive. I had very few tools for sort of operating in the real world. And so I just started writing these stories about a girl very much like me and started moving her through the world so I could kind of look at what was happening. Um, and after that, I mean, it just became a way of life, basically.
Did you always feel like you had a novel in you? I know you wrote a lot of short stories. When did your kind of short stories become novels and become bigger stories?
Gretchen, I never thought I had a novel in me. It never occurred to me to write a novel. That seems really scary. And for people who were very serious writers, I liked short stories. I liked essays. Short form felt really good after going to grad school, which is where you typically learn short form and practice on short form. But then I came across this voice um, that was bigger than a short story and had a lot more to say than a short story. And I think was also coming out of themes that were really big, and wanting to kind of address these like really large themes. And I thought, oh, well, this is what a novel sized idea feels like. And I had never really had a novel sized idea before Nightbitch.
So tell us about that process. So what was because it's a crazy story and a concept of we're all moms here. We all are. We can all, but how? Yeah, walk us through that. What the not only the how the story came about, but you said you didn't think you had a novel in you. So when this comes, kind of what were the challenges and how did you work through those to say, I love what you said, that as women, as moms, as working mothers, we don't say what we want. And that's, that's really what what this how that what that story tells us is, look what's going to happen if you don't do if you don't vocalize and don't say what you want. But can you talk a little bit about that process, even of how you overcame your own challenges or even outside challenges with that first novel?
Well, this novel was written when my son was really young. It probably started when he was 3.
Mm.
And speaking of not being able to say what you want, for the first 2 years of his life, I didn't write at all
Mm.
for kind of obvious reasons. I was new to motherhood. I was in love with my baby. I was trying to reconfigure my life so that everything could work. And I didn't really want to write. I just wanted to stare at my baby and just feel the amazing feelings, and just hold my baby the whole time. So I think another thing that came in those 2 years of silence, is that maybe in early motherhood, maybe in motherhood, we're coming into this new self. Um, and the baby is really primary. Like, we want everything to be stable for our baby. So I think even when things like didn't quite feel right, or I didn't like the way things were negotiated, it was hard for me to kind of feel like I was disrupting my marriage or disrupting the household, because I really wanted to feel like stable and safe. And so I think those 2 years of silence were sort of complete, right? That I was just like, let's make this all really cohere. I'm going to do whatever I need to do. I'm going to sacrifice whatever I need to sacrifice to make this work. And so at the end of those 2 years, I was really frustrated and unable to articulate my frustration, much like Nightbitch, who goes a little feral with her inability to articulate what's going on for her. And I started writing. And my husband was like, "You need to write. You need to go write," because writing has always been my safe zone, right? Even in my 20s, it's the place where I could talk about all the stuff like I couldn't talk to my parents about, and talk about all the stuff that you're not supposed to talk about, and have all the feelings you're not supposed to have.
When you sat down and said, like, were you intimidated a little bit to sit back down, or was it like a natural sit down in terms of like 2 years later, I'm just going to dive right in and this feels natural? Or did you have like a sense of intimidation because you had stepped away from it for a little while?
Oh yeah, ultimate intimidation. It was horrible. Like, who wants to sit down after 2 years? Just what a nightmare. What an absolute nightmare. And I didn't know, I thought, oh, well, maybe, I usually start from a personal impulse. So maybe I'll write an essay about the lactation room at work, which really had been a sort of nightmare for me when I was working. So I started writing it, and it was really angry. And it was this voice that wasn't quite me, right? It was like a voice I hadn't met before. And so I wrote that, and I wrote this. And then I kept thinking, that voice is really provocative. And I wonder who that is and what's going on. And that was actually there's a part in the first section of Nightbitch that takes place where she's talking about the lactation room. And that was actually the first part, which I thought was going to be a personal essay that I wrote. But then when I kind of landed on the first sentence of the book, which is this long 100-word sentence or something, I was sort of off and running, and I wasn't as intimidated anymore because I had a voice with this anger engine, and she just showed up every day I sat down to write. She was like, okay, like, I'm more to bitch about. So it was really a gift in a lot of ways, that she arrived and was like, I'm ready to work.
And when the book was so well received, how, because it is personal, how did how did that feel? How did you kind of manage, like, oh my God, people love, I mean, it was book of the year on so many lists, and and then obviously, and we'll get to the making of a movie and the screenwriting, but how did you, just the accolades that it received?
Well, it came out in the summer of 2021. And a lot of stuff happened before that, including the film deal and everything.
Oh, the film
So,
deal happened even before it came out? Oh,
yeah, I
okay,
mean,
okay.
yeah, like a week after the deal was made, I was talking.
Oh,
Yeah, everyone was very surprised about everything. Most of all me. So this was all happening during the pandemic,
uh-huh,
which was really stressful.
right.
And I think probably worked to the book's benefit because there were so many women, so many
Mhm,
moms
mhm,
who not only were home with their kids, but had quit their jobs, were stepping out of the workforce because they had to make these compromises since they were all sort of stuck in the domestic space. Um, it was really, it was really overwhelming. I mean, it was fun, but I think because the book is so personal,
mhm.
um, it was a lot.
Yeah.
It was a lot. And I actually got sick, not with COVID, but I got sick with, and this is like a whole nother story that at some point will get told, but I got sick with an autoimmune disease. And so the night I had my book party here in Iowa City, my whole body shut down and I like had to cancel um all of my book events. And would you know it, I got something called lupus, which
Mhm,
is, the
mhm,
word for wolf.
mhm,
um and I just think I'm very into metaphors, and I think it's very telling that the wolf sort of the wolf of my body and the wolf of pain sort of came out when the book also came out to the world. Yeah, so and I never thought, I mean, who could have thought there'd be a pandemic? Who could have thought any of this? But it's been a real wild ride, and it just keeps going. And so my relationship also with the book has changed in really interesting ways, I think.
Does it almost feel, the way you're describing it, the book almost feels like it's other now? Like
Very much.
it was
Yeah.
you, and now it's kind of this other being out there all on its own. Is that hard? Does it feel natural, or are you kind of like, that's my, not baby, my baby?
Yeah, right. It feels refreshing actually that I don't have to hold it anymore. Like I put it in the book and I kind of like am giving it to other people. Um, I've also felt really honored and grateful that I've met so many women, right, who read the book and then come to me and they're like, I have this, like, here is my pain. And I can just, instead of having, like, I did my processing, right? Like, I wrote
Mhm,
the book,
mhm,
I moved through it, and now I can kind of hold space for these other women, like for their darkness,
mhm,
right? And they come to me and I'm like, you can show me all your darkness. Like, it doesn't freak me out. Um, I completely understand. And, thanks for reading the book. That has been a huge gift.
mhm.
Uh, yeah, but I like that it's something that's not mine now. It feels like something that belongs to all of us, like a big tribe of women.
Mhm.
And that feels really beautiful.
And were you also teaching during all of this? Are you still?
I wasn't teaching.
Okay.
No, I wasn't teaching. I've taught since then, but
Okay.
that would have
Okay.
been wild if I
I
were
know. I
also.
was like, oh my God, we're teaching the college students on Zoom and doing all this, and a new baby and writing a book and getting it taken. I was like, a movie deal and getting, that's crazy. So you were started teaching after this.
Yes, I was doing some adjunct teaching, and then I
Okay.
actually just joined the faculty in cinema arts at University of Iowa, and I'll be there in the fall. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's something
Yes.
new.
It's a
Oh,
new
Fantastic.
stage.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's exciting. And you're gonna. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is with your book is becoming a film. We all saw the announcements, and so exciting. Amy Adams um, and with teaching screenwriting and in cinematic arts. I'm curious to your thoughts on book to screen and having, adaptations of novels to screen. And we were talking as a and especially as a reader first, because I think we're very opinionated as, beloved novels, go to screen. But I'm kind of curious on how you how you prepare for teaching, and then your own kind of personal thoughts of that world.
Well, I think, I'm sort of a beginner in some ways in screenwriting. I mean, I know story very
Mhm.
well, and I feel really confident in that. And screenwriting is just sort of another form, right, of
Mhm.
delivering the story. I think even though I've just had sort of this one experience with Nightbitch, it was this huge learning curve, right? Like I learned so much in terms of practically how the industry works,
Mhm.
um, how a project can come together. And then something which had never occurred to me, which is ridiculous, but how the document is this very practical text, right? And that as you're writing, perhaps you take the budget into consideration when you're thinking about settings, you
Mhm.
know, and you're thinking about how elaborate a scene is. That had never really occurred to me before. And so then when I sort of ran into the reality, I was like, oh, yeah, like you can't have, I mean, I didn't have a stadium scene, but like you can't just randomly have a stadium scene
Right.
unless you really need it, you
Mhm.
know? Um, so I'm really glad I've had at least one go around with the process because I think that is so invaluable, right? Like you can kind of study screenwriting um, and do it on your own time, but until you really have a little bit of experience at least. So I'm excited to bring that to my students, and also um, what I really love about screenwriting is just all the connections and partnerships and collaborations, because writing a novel is so solitary.
Mhm.
Um, and I love the energy you get with creative collaboration, even with, like notes from producers. They have great ideas. I mean, some of them aren't great, but a lot of them are great. And I'm like, oh, what a relief. Like, I don't have to have all the answers. Other people can chime
That's
in.
amazing. Yeah.
So I'm bringing all that to the classroom and hoping to make it, a collaborative environment,
Mhm.
an environment where we're talking practical considerations too and bringing people in from the industry.
Is it hard to go back and forth? I mean, you wrote a novel, I know you wrote a screenplay. Like, do you do both at the same time? Is it a very different like mindset to be in?
I think it's fun because you have more tools for your ideas. You can go different directions. Say I have an idea and I think, oh, well, that doesn't really work. It works as a short story, but it actually
Mhm.
be a really interesting film
Mhm.
because there's these visual elements that I think are great. I like having that flexibility, but then there's also something really nice about how you can work your film ideas out in a short story. Like I could write a short story and get some of my thinking worked out. Um, and then I have that piece of art that I could publish, and then I could, also make it into
Mhm.
a film. So I do like having the flexibility, but I also, if once I go into a big project, especially a film project, because you need to get it done.
Mhm.
I'm just in the film project. I mean,
Okay.
I would have to stop any other writing. Yeah.
Okay, to be in the film project. No, that makes sense because they're not going to let you meander in a novel for
Yeah, like,
forever. And you're speaking when you talked about collaboration. I was deep down in your website the other day on the journal process on draft. It's such an interesting. I told you I have a son that wants to write, but just the artwork and everything. So, can you talk a little bit about that collaboration? I forgot. I didn't write down your partner's name.
oh, sure. Yeah.
Oh,
Mark Polanzak.
Mark, yeah, and that I mean, just but and it also brings in art and, the cover art. That was just such a fascinating, and then kind of moving it. Did it start out as a teaching tool or did it evolve to that? So it's such a beautiful website. Oh my God.
Oh, thank you. It started out as a friendship project.
Okay.
Mark was a friend of mine in grad school and we were graduating. And, if you're not around your friends anymore, you can kind of just drift apart. And so we're like, let's do this project and just tether ourselves for at least, the next couple of years. So it emerged out of that and we were both teachers. So we were like, how do we teach revision? How do we teach process? Everyone says these are the most important, parts of writing, and yet they're not in the classroom at all. And you don't see the revision at all. So it started out of that. And I think over the years, I've been thinking a lot about process. And I'm sort of like, why are we doing this? Like, it is a teaching tool, but there's something else. And I think what I've come to is that process is really where in any art you make it or break it. Like, process is where a project's going to fail or where a project's going to succeed. And those people who have figured out or who figure out on every project what the process is, and have the agility to sort of shift if what they've tried before isn't working now, and they know where to go to get inspiration, and they know what works for them and what doesn't work for them. You can have sort of determination and sort of a delusional work ethic. Those are great. You can kind of develop talent, right? You just write and write and write. But if your process is flawed, that's where it's going to fall apart, right? Like, if you get to a point where you can't take it any further. And so that's why I think we've been doing this, and also why when I'm teaching writing, I really center process. And it's kind of like an ongoing exercise. How do we center process, especially in a college classroom, when you have to get a grade, at the end of it? And when art isn't about getting a grade, art is about discovering who you are and knowing more about yourself and how you function so that you can get into your work. There's this great book called Art and Fear, and a wonderful line from it that I tell all of my students, that your work is to figure out how to do your work. That is your work as an artist and a writer. And that's sort of that like lifelong process. And I also think, I mean, now I'm really on my I'm on my high horse, but I also think that because of this, because creativity and creative classes are so process oriented, that they actually teach you like how to be a human, teach you life skills for like after college, how to go out and self-reflect, how to work through a problem.
Problem solving skills.
Problem
Absolutely.
solving. And I think every major in college should have a creativity track in it where you're talking about creative process, because even an engineer has a creative, like everyone has a creative process. And I think it's been pushed aside as this thing that's sort of like fluffy and, it's nice to be creative, when it's actually really central to how we live.
I love, there was one of the statements on the website about almost what you said, like showing your work, like you have to, you show your process, you have to showing your edits. And what kind of came to mind was almost this social media world that we live in, that we, especially young people, our children, that we try to, like, that's not the real world. They're showing you the finished product. They're showing you the perfect vacation, not the work that got there, not what they looked like on the morning of prom day, but but it's that. And that almost like popped in, or that did pop in my head when you were saying, or on the website when I was reading those statements of showing that work and showing that process, because whether it was the fine art of the cover art or the writing or the story. It's not, you didn't sit down and write it and, and have no errors and have no edits and have no, ripping up the paper or whatever the online metaphor is now of ripping the paper out of the typewriter and throwing it away.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great point about how social media has sort of shifted the culture. And I think it's because of social media, we're much less willing perhaps to be vulnerable too, and
That process.
to be honest. And I think, focusing on process, being creative, in order to get there, you have to be vulnerable, right? You have to be honest, or the art isn't good. And it's completely antithetical, to these online lives that we lead.
Yeah, I think it's just, I love the idea of everything has a creative process. Even if you, like you said, even if it's mechanical and engineering, you don't think it is. It's absolutely, I mean, math, I mean, anything. It is absolutely, there's a process there. Um, so as you're working through your process with writing, I think, what are some of the things that you do? What are the things, like, if you have writer's block or you're just unmotivated? What are some of the things that kind of have gotten you through your projects?
Well, that book I mentioned, Art and Fear, when I was working on an adaptation of the book, which is not the adaptation that got used, speaking of being terrified, Renee, I would sit down during the pandemic with my kid in the other room with, this task of writing a feature film, and I was just paralyzed. Like, I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. And I would read a little bit from that book, and it would be like, it's okay. You're terrified. We all are when we start our work. And I was like, oh, okay. So I really found community in that book. And I found myself in the pages. And so that was really important. I think community in books and community in people, is a really important part of keeping me going.
Yeah.
And I think also just consuming or being in touch with a lot of different art, like film will be really inspirational to my writing. Studio art and performance art was really inspirational, and dance, to the adaptation that I wrote. And like I was saying before, I consider not just writers, but sort of all artists part of this tribe. So it's kind of like turning to your tribe and saying, what have you been doing? And are there some interesting ideas in that then like help me generate my own work? Yeah. And typically with writing, I will read something and I see the writer doing something that I either want to try for myself or that sparks some sort of idea that I want to do in my own work.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and also going to readings. I don't go to readings really to listen to the reading. I go because they're just they get stuff going in my head,
Mm-hmm.
especially listening to the author maybe talk afterwards. Yeah.
Rachel, in terms of when you're talking about community, obviously, love, it was Fear and, or sorry, the book that you go
Art
back to,
and Fear.
Art and Fear. I'm tongue tied. Are there other books that you consistently go back to, or is when you're looking at, decompressing or trying to get through an idea, obviously you have some of your methods, but do you decompress and read something completely out of genre for you, or watch something out of genre that you're enjoying, or, that kind of gets you out of your head? Like, do you go and watch a rom-com or?
Well, a lot of times my husband has this like encyclopedic knowledge of film. He's a
Okay.
filmmaker. So a lot of times he'll know what I'm working on and I'll be like, oh, I'm really stuck. And he's like, I have the perfect thing. And he'll show
Okay.
me the perfect thing that then, like gets me back into it. That's maybe tangentially related. I'm turning here to look at what books I have here. I mean, I do have sort of my holy texts back here, like a collection by Amy Hempel, this Louise Bourgeois. It's called Drawings and Observations. That's this like cryptic little book of drawings and really just strange things she wrote. So I'll definitely turn to that sometimes.
Okay.
And sometimes I don't write. Like I know forcing it will not be good, so I give myself room to just maybe I don't write for a few days.
Okay.
And when you're, I know we're almost out of time. You've been so great to give us time. Thank you so much. But what, taking care of your child and your health, and now teaching and all of those. Do you have what else do you like? What do you like to do outside of work? Are there podcasts? Are there, like you said, there's favorite movies that your husband refers, just to kind of like really get out of escape from everything? Because for us, it's books.
It's books. Yes. For me, it is gardening. I will have days where I'm just I don't know what to do with myself. And I'm like, I need to, I mean, this sounds very Nightbitch, but like, I need to go and get literally grounded, like put my hands in soil, like pull up the weeds, feel the sun. It's so healing. It's just, it heals all that ails me. So, it's a really beautiful time of the year right now to be outside. And I don't really have that option in the winter here. I wonder what I do in the winter. I probably work out because I want to like get in my body, like instead of being in my head, I want to do something that's like physical.
Yeah, I think that's I've only been in the Midwest now, almost 3 years, and there is something just so wild about the winter wanting to, and maybe it's like because you want to make heat. I don't know. But I feel that too. I'm like, in the summer, the last thing I want to do is go work out or go, like, it's so beautiful outside, we're gonna go run and walk. I'm like, oh, it's humid. But the winter, it's so.
I think it is about getting warm.
Yeah,
I mean, truly.
there's something fun about that.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for being with us. Oh my gosh, it's been so great to get to know you and to hear your story, and we're all excited to see what's coming next. We're excited to see. So Nightbitch is going to be a holiday film. Right now, that's the plan. I know they can always change, but right now, a holiday film. Are you excited to see it on screen?
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yes, of course. And it's really fun because this isn't my project,
Right,
it's
right.
Marielle Heller's, it's Amy Adams' project. And so I feel like I'm just along for the ride and it's really great. Yeah.
No, that's great. But thank you so much. It's so nice to meet you, and we're excited to keep following and seeing what comes next.
Thanks so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave a review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. To stay up to date with In Her Words, join the conversation by following Women in Entertainment on our social channels and subscribe to our weekly newsletter at womeninentertainment.com.